Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where your name is spat, your coin is cursed, and yet your job is absolutely essential. Picture a chilly dawn, the fog clinging to crooked cobblestones. You stand by a wooden platform, its timbers damp with last night's rain or something else. A noose sways gently in the breeze, like a greeting from the reaper. You reach down to adjust your hood. It smells faintly of soot and old onions. Today, you're the executioner. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the town square, and already they're looking at you. Not with awe, not even with fear, just a prickling disgust, like you tracked something unpleasant into church. A butcher might slice pigs all day and earn respect. You butcher men, and somehow that makes you less. The gallows looms an ugly skeleton of wood at the edge of the square. Nearby, a few curious children watch you work. Their mothers pretend not to stare, but one woman crosses herself when you pass. You feel it in your chest, the gnawing emptiness of being needed and hated all at once. Backstage, there's no velvet curtain. Just the tools of your craft and a half-rotted crate iron, shackles of blood-stained cloth, your lucky hatchet more rust than luck really. And the ledger. Always the ledger. You sign off the condemned like they're barrels of salted fish. It's a living, sort of. Your house is at the edge of town. Always. Too close and you offend the church. Too far and they complain about the smell when you boil heads. It's hard to say what your place smells like now. Ashes, herbs, maybe damp leather. You stopped noticing. Your morning starts before the roosters, not from ambition, but necessity. Executions are scheduled early before the market fills. Less mess, fewer witnesses. You dress in the same stiff leather apron, patched socks, and a woolen cap your aunt knitted before she stopped visiting. There's not really a guild for executioners. You're part civil servant, part boogeyman. Your salary is paid from the city's coffers when they remember. You once got half a pig as bonus pay after beheading a lord. That night, you ate better than the mayor. You wonder sometimes about your predecessors. The stories go back centuries. Some say your position is cursed. Others that it's an honor passed through the shadows. Historians still argue whether executioners were chosen for cruelty for strength or simply because no one else would do it. Right now, you're thinking of breakfast. You fry something in a pan egg, maybe. Hard to tell anymore. Your cat rubs against your leg, the only creature in town that doesn't flinch at your touch. You once named her Mercy, a joke too bitter to explain. You reach the scaffold. The condemned is already there, a thief this time. He stinks of fear and onions. The priest offers a few quick words, salvation, repentance, the usual. The crowd hushes as you climb the steps. You nod to the guard. The rope creaks. There's a strange rhythm to it all, a pulsing routine. The final breath, the pause, the drop. You've done this so many times. It should feel automatic. It doesn't. Later, as you clean the platform, you wonder if anyone sees you. Not the hooded mask, not the grim figure, but the person. The one who didn't ask for this life. The one who still flinches when the rope tightens. You carry your tools back in silence, the square, already bustling with commerce. Bread, cheese, gossip. Life resumes, and you, shadow-footed and grimy, disappear into the mist. You weren't born into this job. Nobody cradled a newborn and whispered, "One day he'll swing the axe." In fact, most executioners found themselves here by the rough hand of chance or punishment. You were once a baker, perhaps, or a soldier, or even just a man who owed the wrong person too much silver. The path here, rarely noble, often bizarre. Some towns appointed executioners as a form of clemency. Commit a crime. Agree to become the hangman and avoid the noose yourself. A gruesome trade, your life for others. You signed the ledger with hands still shaking from your own sentencing. There were even families cursed or blessed, depending on perspective, with hereditary executioner roles. In Nuremberg, for instance, the Franz Schmidt lineage executed for over 40 years. Historians still argue whether these dynasties were respected for their efficiency or reviled for their bloodline. In your case, no grand tale, just a scuffle in a tavern, a body on the floor, and a magistrate with an eye for useful punishment. One moment, you're shouting over ale. The next, you're sharpening blades and avoiding mirrors. The first day was the worst. You were handed a hood itchy, reeking of old sweat and a wooden mallet. To soften them up, the guard said not unkindly. The condemned begged in a dialect you barely understood. You hesitated. They didn't. From that moment, your name vanished. To the town, you became simply the hangman. Even old friends avoided your gaze. You once tried to buy bread, and the baker refused your coin. Not angrily, just quietly apologetically, as though you were death in the flesh. The only consistent kindness came from strangers passing through. Travelers, too unfamiliar to know your reputation, treated you like a normal man. You cherished those fleeting moments, talking about weather horses, a joke shared over watered-down wine. There were no apprenticeships, no mentors. You learned as you went. You learned quickly, not because someone taught you, but because the consequences of failure were messy. A rope too loose, a blade too dull. One scream too many, and the crowd could turn. There's no forgiveness for incompetence in your line of work, only pitchforks. Sometimes you wonder if your soul is still intact. The priest won't look at you directly anymore, though he still nods from a safe distance. You dream of fire, of faces you can't name. Some nights you wake up gripping your own neck nails, biting into skin. Other times you almost forget who you were before. You try to recall your mother's voice, your childhood games, the smell of summer bread. But the memories come filtered, like viewing a life that belonged to someone else. Your home reflects this fractured identity. One wall displays your tools with grim precision. Another holds a shelf of old books, mostly unread. There's a sketch you once made of a lake done in charcoal. It's lopsided like most things now. You occasionally try to write letters, but there's no one left to receive them. Even if there were, what would you say? Hello from the scaffold. Still lonely. Still cursed. You keep a journal instead, hidden beneath the floorboards. Not for confession, but for clarity. One entry reads, "He was calm. Didn't look at me. I think he forgave me." Another, "Simply rained today. Rope slippery. Each scribble a tether to something human. And still the town needs you. Every festival, every royal visit, every trial with a sharp sentence. You're the closing act, the grim punctuation mark. No one thanks you, but they expect you. And so you keep walking, one foot after the other, down muddy alleys, past shuttered windows, toward the scaffold, toward the next name on the list. Your tools are, let's call them, specialized. They live in a cracked oak chest reinforced with iron bands and stained with too many pasts. Some are standard, a length of sturdy hemp rope knotted precisely to snap a neck clean. Others are less familiar. Hooks, tongs, branding irons in the shape of letters, numbers, and for some reason, a tiny fleur-de-lis. You don't ask questions anymore. The axe is, of course, the centerpiece. Heavy two-handed, with a blade broad enough to reflect your face, though you rarely look. You've named it, perhaps. Many do. Something ridiculous, like mercy or judgment, just to keep your sanity from slipping entirely. There's also the sword, reserved for nobles. Strange, isn't it? Peasants get the rope or axe, but nobles, they get a clean cut. More honorable, they say, as if decapitation feels different when done with flair. You keep the blade wrapped in oiled linen, lest it rust from disuse or neglect. It's an artifact of class, resting alongside soot and blood. Your apron, coarse leather, thick and cracked, is your uniform. It smells like smoke and lard. You clean it sometimes. Other times you don't bother. You stopped smelling the blood years ago. There's also the small things, a whetstone worn to a pebble, a rag that used to be a shirt, and a flask of something unlabeled but undeniably strong. You sip it before every job, just one. Steadying the hands, calming the mind. A day's work begins with choosing the right tool. Hanging. Then it's about weights and measures. A body too light will suffer, too heavy, and you might take the head clean off. There are gruesome charts for this tucked in your chest under a loose floorboard. For beheadings, the axe must be sharp, razor sharp. You spend hours at your grindstone, working in quiet circles. It's almost meditative. Sparks dance in the gloom, lighting your cramped workshop with brief flashes of orange. Branding is a foul affair. You heat the irons over coals until they glow like tiny suns. The hiss of flesh is unforgettable. And not just for you. Those condemned rarely scream, they howl. And later, when you're alone, that howl replays itself again and again. Your cleaning tools are just as important. A stiff brush, water, vinegar, and ashes. You scrub the platform between jobs. Not for respectability, but because blood attracts flies and flies lead to questions. You once left a stain, and a priest refused to bless the square for a week. Sometimes you think about upgrading. New leather gloves, a sharper blade, maybe even padded boots. But the town only gives you coin in recognition of services rendered, which is to say, barely enough for lamp oil and bread. So you make do. Occasionally, a scholar or a curious visitor comes asking questions. What's it like, they ask, eyes wide, with morbid curiosity. You answer with a shrug. You don't have the words or the energy to explain how holding a man's life in your hands strips something from your soul. You keep your gear well hidden when not in use. Children have broken into your shed before looking for the haunted rope. You caught them once mid-dare and simply stared until they ran. You didn't yell. You didn't need to. The tools are heavy, yes, but the real weight is in your arms after the job. It's in the silence after a clean cut, in the quiet drip of blood from wood to earth. It's in your bones your joints, your dreams. And still, you keep them sharp, keep them close, keep them hidden. Because tomorrow, another name might be called. You are the town's pariah and its necessity. When you pass by, shutters creak closed just a little faster. Children are yanked indoors, and even stray dogs slink away. But when the bailiff needs someone executed before the midsummer fair, who does he call? Not the priest, not the mayor. You. It's a strange purgatory. You exist in the space between law and loathing. You're not quite part of the justice system, though you carry out its sentences. You're not quite a criminal, though everyone treats you like one. Instead, you drift half visible, half feared, fully indispensable. The butcher won't sit near you at church. Not that you go often. The pews shift when you enter like oil on water. But come festival day, that same butcher nods and offers you the lesser cuts of meat still warm from the cleaver. Not as a gift, as insurance. People speak around you, never to you. In the tavern, you sit alone, your drink served with a quiet nod. Conversations hush when you raise your mug. Laughter fades. It returns once you leave, like fog melting in sun. Once a child asked if you were the devil. You laughed, gently, quietly. Then you realized the child wasn't joking. Your social circle, such as it is, consists of outcasts. The grave digger, the night soil man, a toothless peddler who claims to sell love potions made from rabbit livers. You don't mind the company. You all understand each other. No explanations necessary. You used to try. You'd smile at neighbors, offer help keep your hood off so they could see your face. But none of it mattered. You could wash the blood from your hands, but never from your name. Still they need you. A noble's son gets caught dueling illegally. Bring out the axe. A thief steals during Lent. Fetch the rope. A woman accused of sorcery. You know the drill. The townsfolk recoil from your touch, but they cheer when you work. It's hypocrisy you've grown used to. You begin to recognize the pattern. There's a certain energy in the air before an execution. Bakers bake extra loaves. Tavern keepers stock more ale. Children get restless. Even the crows gather early, as if sensing a feast. Sometimes you hear whispers from the crowd, people placing bets. Will he faint? Will the rope snap? They speak as if you aren't there, as if you're part of the scenery. Just another grim fixture of justice. There's a bitter humor in it. You once overheard a woman say, "At least he's punctual." It was meant as a compliment. You think, still not everyone avoids you. There are the desperate ones, the families of the condemned. They visit you in secret, eyes, hollow fingers trembling. They bring gifts, bread coins, even jewelry. Make it quick, they whisper. Make it painless. You never accept the bribes, not because of honor, but because it wouldn't help. Pain doesn't always obey your hand, and mercy is not always yours to give. The town, for all its rituals, has no place for your grief. When you falter, miss a step, flinch at a scream, they don't comfort, they judge. Your errors are their entertainment, your success, forgotten the next day, yet they keep you. Because every society, no matter how righteous, needs someone to bear the weight of judgment. Someone who ensures justice is not just done, but seen to be done. Loudly, publicly, and preferably with a clean drop. And so you stay, standing just outside the light, just beneath the smiles. Their invisible blade, They're unspoken sin. There's no training for this, no boot camp, no instruction manual. When you became the executioner, no one sat you down to explain the finer points of neck anatomy or the best swing angle. You were handed a dull axe and told with alarming cheerfulness, just swing hard. The first time was chaos. You remember the condemned trembling the crowd, murmuring, your palms slick with sweat. You overswung. The blade hit bone. It took 2 more strikes to finish the job. The crowd booed. You went home and vomited behind your shed. The second time wasn't much better, but at least you didn't miss. Now, you've developed a technique. You study weight posture, even wind direction. You mark spots on the scaffold floor for your feet. You practice with sacks of sand quietly away from the eyes of townsfolk who'd rather pretend you don't exist. Still, there are days when nothing works. Your rope, for instance, is finicky. If too short, it chokes slowly. Too long, it snaps the neck too violently. You've read old grimoires, yes? There are books on this. Written by monks, oddly enough. Charts that recommend drop lengths based on weight and height. As if justice were math. You once tried following the formula exactly. The result, the man's head turned completely around, eyes frozen open. The crowd screamed. Children cried. You received a cabbage to the chest. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners had formal standards or simply learned through repetition. You're confident it was the latter. Otherwise, someone would have told you what to do when the axe sticks mid-swing. You've picked up tricks along the way. Rub beeswax on the blade. Hold your breath on the drop. Avoid eye contact. It helps somewhat. Then there's the mental game. You've tried rehearsing soothing phrases. It will be quick, or this is the last pain you'll feel. But when you're standing there, heart pounding, with dozens of eyes watching the words tangle on your tongue, you nod instead. It feels colder, cleaner. You've even experimented with stance. A wider footing offers more control, but narrows your swing. Knees bent means less shock in your arms, but your back aches for days. You try not to think about posture during the job, but later the pain reminds you. And yes, you've had failures. A blade bouncing off a collarbone, a rope that frays mid-use. One time the condemned slipped away seconds before you reached the platform. You chased them through the square apron, flapping the crowd, howling with laughter and horror. You caught them, but the embarrassment clung to you for weeks. When these mishaps occur, the townspeople are less forgiving. They don't blame the faulty rope or the worn blade. They blame you. As if death should be neat and precise. As if you didn't practice every day for a job that no one taught you. So you invent your own rituals. You sharpen your blade by moonlight. You tie and retie your rope knots like prayers. You talk to your tools not out of madness, but because they're the only ones who listen without judgment. And sometimes, rarely, you get it right. One clean strike, no blood spray, just silence, swift and final. The crowd exhales. The priest murmurs a blessing. And you briefly, faintly feel like you did something well. Not good, never good, but competent. Then it's over, and you're left with the echo of your own heartbeat, the weight of your tools, and the smell of sawdust and sweat. There's no diploma, no badge, no ceremony. Just the slow grind of repetition, of refining death into something less jagged. You've become your own teacher. Because no one else wanted the job, you pack your tools by lamplight, wrapping blades and irons in oilcloth, securing the rope with an old sailor's knot you picked up from a prisoner long since buried. Another town needs you today, 2 hangings and a branding by sunset. It's time for the circuit. Executioners don't always stay put. Sometimes the nearby villages lack their own. They borrow you. They send a rider ahead, or sometimes just a scribbled note attached to a pie. Yes, that actually happened once. You mount your horse, a gray mare named Salter, who tolerates you better than most humans, and begin the journey. The roads are muddy, and the wheels of your supply cart creak with every rut. No fanfare, no escort, unless the weather's bad or the prisoner's important. Today you ride alone. You wear your hood pulled low. Even here, miles from home, villagers know what your cart means. Some stop and stare. Others cross themselves. A few throw things, soft ones usually. You take it all in silence. The work awaits. At the first village, a crowd is already forming near a makeshift gallows by the well. It's a poor structure. 2 beams lashed together, wobbly and half-rotten. You inspect it with a professional's eye, then silently reinforce the base. You've seen gallows collapse mid-drop. Once was enough. The condemned is a sheep thief. Skinny, wild-eyed, still claiming innocence. You glance at the local bailiff, who shrugs. That's your problem now? You perform your duties efficiently. Rope check, height adjust. Not behind the left ear, it's supposed to break the neck faster. 1 deep breath, then the drop. A sharp jerk, a single gasp, then stillness. The crowd murmurs. You hear someone whisper, "Better than the last one." It's praise of a kind. You don't linger. There's another job waiting 2 towns over. You eat a hard-boiled egg as you ride. It tastes like ash, but it keeps your stomach steady. The next town's request is more complicated. A double execution, siblings accused of banditry. You meet the brother first. He's resigned. The sister furious, spits at your boots. You nod. You've learned not to take it personally. The scaffold here is sturdier. You set up 2 nooses, check for knots, test the trap door. The guards stay well back, pretending they're not involved. You mutter a few words to the condemned. Not comfort, exactly, just acknowledgement. Then it's done. 2 quick pulls, a flicker of motion, then quiet. You clean your hands in a trough, ignoring the staring children. One of the local women tries to hand you bread. You refuse politely. She insists. You accept mostly to end the conversation. Later, you find a note tucked into the cloth. For when your hands feel heavier than usual, you don't know who wrote it. You don't ask. The final stop is a branding. Less common now, but still practiced for repeat offenders. The iron is heated until it glows like a sunset. The man shakes as you press it into his shoulder. He doesn't scream, just grits his teeth until they bleed. You admire that quietly. Once it's done, you sit for a moment on a low stone wall, watching smoke curl from the brazier. Your gloves smell of burnt hair. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows over your cart. Salter stamps impatiently. You ride back under a sky turning from gold to gray. There's no applause, no coin tossed your way. Just the creak of wood, the jingle of bridles, and the faint scent of ash and earth. As you near home, a child waves at you from a distant field. You raise a hand in return. Not that he'll remember your face, only the hood. You wonder how many miles you've ridden in silence, how many names you've heard last, and how many more you'll hear before your own is called. Coins clink softly in your pouch, the meager sound echoing louder than it should. Payment has never been generous, but at least today you weren't stiffed. That's not always a guarantee. Your wages come in strange rhythms, sometimes in coin, sometimes in food, occasionally a goat. There's no fixed salary. Towns negotiate haggle or simply forget. Once you received a chicken as delayed wages and had to chase it around your yard for 20 minutes before it vanished into the woods. You named it justice in bitter irony. Officially, the role of executioner comes with perks. You're exempt from certain taxes. You're sometimes given a free tankard of ale after a job, more out of habit than hospitality. You also have the right to claim the clothing and possessions of the condemned, a grim tradition known as the executioner's fee. You don't always accept it. The idea of rummaging through a dead man's boots doesn't sit well. But when coin is tight and bread prices rise, you make exceptions. You've found ring scarves, once a very nice pair of shears. You still use those. The job's real danger isn't the blade or the rope. It's the people. The ones in the crowd who think you enjoy it. The ones who think you're cursed and avoid you. And worst of all, the ones who want revenge. One time, a man spat in your drink at the tavern. You saw him do it, locked eyes, and drank anyway. Just to show you didn't care. You spent the night praying to 3 different saints and vomiting into a bucket. Lesson learned. You carry a dagger under your belt now. Not for show, not out of paranoia, just insurance. Another time, a brother of the condemned jumped onto the scaffold and swung a punch. You dodged it barely. The guard was too slow. The crowd watched, not helping, just waiting. It's not just strangers you fear. Sometimes the anger comes from within. You catch yourself clenching your fists for no reason, snapping at the cat, drinking too early in the day. You keep it bottled up, but you know someday that bottle might shatter. The coin doesn't help much. You can't buy companionship, not here. You once tried to hire a maid. She left after one day, said the shadows in your house whispered. You didn't argue. Still, you find ways to cope. You collect smooth stones. Don't ask why. You just do. You keep them in a jar by the window. When the nightmares wake you, you reach into the jar and count. 1, 2, 3. It helps. You also carve, badly. Little animals' faces, once even a miniature gallows. You gave that one to the gravedigger. He laughed for a full minute. Once in a while you get lucky. A baron's court requests your services. Those pay better 5, maybe 10 times your usual rate. You clean your apron, polish the axe, even comb your hair. You pretend you're someone else for a day, someone important. But then you return home where your roof leaks and your neighbor leaves spoiled meat on your doorstep by accident. You count your coins again. Not many, not enough, never quite enough. But the ledger still fills. The names still come. And the pouch, however light, still jingles like a reminder that death always pays. Just not well. It's the botched jobs that haunt you the most. You can forget the clean ones. You do, in fact. The quick drop, the silent snap, the merciful end, they blur together like fog in a field. But the ones that go wrong, they stick. They etch themselves into your bones. There was the thief with a neck too thin. You miscalculated the drop. He kicked for a full minute. The crowd started counting out loud. At 23, someone threw a turnip. Then the nobleman who demanded a sword beheading. You hadn't used the sword in months. It wasn't sharp enough. You swung once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, the head came off, but so did your dignity. The crowd booed. The priest whispered something about damnation. There are no do-overs in your work. No second chances. Only silence or screaming. You've developed little rituals to avoid mistakes. Double knot the rope. Test the trapdoor. Swing the axe through empty air to feel its weight that morning. It's not perfection, but it helps. Still, something always finds a way to go wrong. Like the time your apprentice passed out mid-job. He was supposed to stabilize the body. Instead, he fainted, knocking over the brazier and setting your cloak on fire. The crowd thought it was part of the punishment. You didn't correct them. Then there was the case of the innocent, a last-minute confession from the real killer, delivered by a drunken uncle an hour too late. You had already performed the job. The family never looked at you again. You couldn't blame them. Historians still argue whether public executions were meant to deter crime or simply entertain. You're not sure either. All you know is the crowd always wants a show, and if you mess up, they turn on you. They cheer when the rope is taut and the body still. They cheer louder when it twitches. It's grotesque, but you understand it. It's the only time most of them feel powerful. When they're watching someone else suffer. You wear your hood tighter on those days. There are subtle signs when a job's about to go badly. The wind changes. The platform creaks louder. The condemned starts to smile. That's the worst when they smile. Like they know something you don't. You had one man bless you before the axe fell. You still think about that. What did he see in you? A monster, a priest, a fellow prisoner. After a failed job, there's no formal reprimand, no supervisor to scold you, just silence. People whisper. The tavern goes quieter than usual. Children mimic your mistake in street games. You drink more that week. Sleep less. You once dreamed of a scaffold collapsing beneath you over and over until the ropes turned to snakes. You woke up biting your own tongue. The blood tasted like rust. You keep a tally on the back wall of your workshop, not of the deaths, of the failures. A simple mark for each one. You thought it would keep you accountable. Now, it just reminds you. There's a superstition among executioners, those few you've met, that after 3 botched jobs your soul starts to rot, that the tools begin to betray you, that your hands shake just a little more each time. You don't believe it. Not really. But your hands do shake, and the axe does slip. And sometimes at night you hear the crowd booing in your dreams, even when no one is there. Disposing of the dead is your job too, no matter what the town says. Officially, the priest offers last rites. Officially, the town gravedigger handles the burial. but unofficially. After the crowd leaves, after the mayor delivers a polite nod and walks off whistling, it's you who cleans up the aftermath. You drag the bodies yourself, down from the platform, across the courtyard, over to the cart. There's no ceremony, just the scrape of boots on wood, the dull thud of limbs hitting straw. Sometimes you hum, not out of disrespect, but because silence feels worse. The destination depends on the crime. Thieves go to the potter's field, witches to the ravine behind the abbey wall. Nobles get proper burial, sometimes, but the rest no gravestones, no names, just shallow graves marked by a crooked stick, if you remember to plant one. You've learned how to dig quickly. The trick is to angle the spade, use your foot for leverage, and avoid the rocks. You keep lime on hand for the worst cases, helps with the smell. The gravedigger taught you that between sips of cider. Some towns won't let the bodies lie within their walls. You once hauled a corpse 5 miles in a cart with a broken wheel. It rained. The body rolled. You didn't speak to anyone for 3 days after that. You clean the platform with sand and vinegar. It doesn't remove the stains, but it dulls the color enough to avoid complaints. The blood runs into the cracks between the planks, where it dries like varnish. You scrub until your fingers blister. There's no official pay for this part. No one writes corpse disposal on the parchment, but they expect it. And if you don't do it, you hear about it. You once left a body overnight during a festival. The next morning, the mayor gave you a warning, then asked if you'd be free for a branding next week. You nodded. Of course. Sometimes you get creative. You've used old Wells dry cellars once, even a frozen pond. The trick with the pond is to wait until the thaw. No one checks until spring. One year a jawbone floated up during a May Day picnic. You didn't get blamed, but you didn't sleep for weeks. Historians still argue how medieval towns managed body disposal without overwhelming their burial grounds. Some say executioners were also gravediggers. Others believe certain monastic orders took over the task. You suspect it was usually someone like you, tired, quiet, and unpaid. The animals know too. Crows gather when you work. They're smart. They remember faces. One old crow perches on the gallows beam during every job. You've named him Squire. He's the closest thing to a co-worker you've got. Dogs come at night sniffing. You build fences around your burial sites now. Crude ones, but enough to keep curious snouts away. You don't want the children finding anything. Not again. Once during winter, the ground froze solid. You couldn't dig. You wrapped the body in burlap and hid it in your shed. It stayed for 3 days. You slept in the barn. Even now, you avoid that corner of the shed. There's no dignity in this part of the work, but you treat it with care. You cover the faces. You close the eyes. You whisper sometimes not prayers, but apologies. You don't believe the condemned hear you, but it makes it easier. Because if you ever stop believing they were people, even for a moment, you become something else entirely. Your home sits at the far edge of town, where the road thins and the weeds reclaim the stone. No one passes by unless they're lost or desperate. You like it that way. The cottage is crooked. One window leans inward, and the door creaks like it's mourning. The roof leaks. The floor groans. You patch things when you can. More often, you just step around the broken spots. Inside, it's quieter than most churches. A low fire burns year-round in the hearth, not for comfort, mostly to keep the damp away. The chimney doesn't draw well. Smoke sometimes spills into the rafters, curling above you like a ghost unsure of its haunting. You live alone, have for years. You once had a dog, but it ran off during a thunderstorm. You've never replaced it. The cat at least stays. She's old-fat and uninterested in your profession. Your furniture is sparse. A bed stuffed with straw. A table with one leg shorter than the others. A chair you carved yourself badly. There's a shelf of books, mostly medical texts, and 2 tattered volumes on herbs. One has a dried toad pressed between the pages. You don't remember putting it there. There's a mirror in the back room. You keep it covered. You don't entertain guests. Not because you're rude, but because no one comes. People avoid your house the way they avoid graveyards and snake pits. Children dare each other to touch your door. They never knock. The only regular visitor is the bailiff's assistant who brings your assignments wrapped in oilskin. He never stays long. Sometimes he mutters a polite word. Most times he just leaves the message and backs away like he's delivering something toxic. Even your garden grows differently. The soil's rich from ash, but the plants twist sideways. You grow onions, leeks, and bitter greens, things no one would steal. Once, a neighbor's goat wandered in, ate half your garden, and keeled over within the week. No one blamed you. Out loud. You keep a few belongings hidden. A small locket, a wooden whistle, a pair of baby shoes long since outgrown by the child you'll never see again. You don't talk about that part of your life, not even to the cat. Nights are the hardest. The silence feels thicker here. The wind moans through the shutters, and the fire pops like knuckles cracking in the dark. You hear things sometimes. A knock, a whisper, a footstep that never finishes. You tell yourself it's the wood settling. You lie convincingly. You drink sometimes, not to forget, but to sleep. Even then, the dreams are unreliable. You once dreamed of hanging yourself, only to wake up and find the noose on the wall swaying gently. You laughed. Then you cried. Then you sharpened your axe. You have a journal, not for posterity, just to keep the words out of your head. Some entries are mundane. Rain again. Rope still damp. Others read like riddles. I saw him again. The one who didn't blink. There's a comfort in writing even if no one ever reads it. Your home is your refuge. Your cell, your penance. The town wants you separate, and you oblige. It's easier this way. Cleaner. No neighbors to comfort or confront. No awkward smiles at the market. No one to see you crack. You wonder sometimes if this house will outlast you. If the roof will finally cave, the weeds grow through the floor, and the wind claim the walls. You imagine your bones in the chair journal open, cat curled at your feet. It wouldn't be the worst ending. But for now, you stoke the fire, mend the rope, and wait. Because sooner or later, someone will come knocking. Even if they never touch the door. Children of executioners grow up strange, not by choice, by osmosis. They learn early which alleyways to avoid, which market stalls will sell to them with a nod, and which will chase them off with curses. They know not to speak of their father's work at school, or anywhere really. And they master silence like a second language. You had two, a boy and a girl. Once, they were small, curious, always asking questions you couldn't answer. Why do you have so many ropes? Why don't the other dads say hi to you? What's branding you dodge their questions, built stories instead? The ropes were for climbing. The axe was for firewood. The black bag was for special deliveries. Your wife tried to shield them. She was strong, clever, and tired beyond her years. She stopped attending church long before you did. The stares got to her. So did the whispers. Eventually, she left. Not in anger, just exhaustion. Packed quietly. Kissed the children. Kissed you. Said she loved you, but couldn't watch anymore. She moved to a different town. Took the children with her. You haven't seen them since. The house felt emptier after that. The silence shifted from peace to punishment. You kept a few of their toys, a carved horse, a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. You touch them sometimes, absently, like checking if they're still warm. In some towns, children of executioners weren't even allowed to marry. Marked by blood, they were shunned like lepers. A few tried to fight it, to reclaim some dignity. Most gave up. Some left. Some became executioners themselves. Historians still argue whether this ostracism came from religious superstition or raw social fear. Probably both. You've seen how even the most devout priest flinches when your daughter reached for his sleeve. You remember how she looked at you after. You wrote letters at first, carefully worded, hopeful. Sent gifts, too. A wool scarf, a drawing of the house, a pressed flower from the field behind the scaffold. You never received a reply. You stopped writing eventually, not because you stopped caring, but because you feared you'd say too much, or worse, nothing worth saying. Once a traveler passed through your town, asked for directions. He mentioned your daughter's name, casually said he'd heard it in a school in another province. You nodded like it meant nothing. You didn't sleep that night. You try not to picture them grown, not because you don't want to, but because it hurts. You imagine your son with calloused hands, your daughter with laughter in her voice. You pretend they've forgotten what you do. You hope they've forgotten your face in the hood. The house bears their memory like a bruise, a scuffed wall where a toy sword once struck, a window etched with tiny fingerprints. You've never washed them away, and yet there's a part of you that still prepares. You keep a second chair by the fire just in case. You keep the pantry stocked with tea they used to drink. You fix the roof, not just for yourself, but for the idea that maybe one day they'll visit, just once. And maybe after all the silence they'll ask, why did you stay? You don't know what you'll say, but you'll pour the tea anyway, and sit, and listen, and hope. The line between guilt and redemption is thin and constantly moving. You try not to think about it. You do the job. You keep the town's peace. You follow orders. And yet when the wind howls through the shutters and the fire has turned to embers, you find yourself staring into the dark, wondering, what if I hadn't swung? There's no priest who'll absolve you. Officially, the church condemns what you do. Unofficially, they benefit from it. More than once, you've seen the abbey courtyard gleam with coins on execution day. Repentance fund, they call it. You've approached the confessional a few times, sat on the splintered bench, knees creaking, hands clasped. You open your mouth and close it again. What are you supposed to say? Forgive me, Father, for I took 48 lives this year. The priest coughs. You leave without a word. Some towns won't let you bury the dead in consecrated ground. They fear the souls will pollute the graves of the righteous. So you dig outside the church walls in that patch of rocky soil the rain never softens. You say your own prayers, strange little half-rhymes you make up under your breath. Like ash to ash and dust to sleep, no soul is mine for me to keep. Not theology, but it helps. You receive offerings sometimes, not from the townsfolk, but from the condemned. A ring, a tooth, a lock of hair. Talismans, they call them. You don't keep them for luck. You bury them near your threshold under flat stones. A secret graveyard of guilt. There was one man, tall, scarred, missing 2 fingers, who kissed your hand before you hanged him. Called you brother. Said he hoped you'd find peace before he did. You still think about that. Still check the mirror sometimes, half expecting to see his face. You don't talk to the townsfolk about it. Not that they'd listen. They think you're made of iron, that you don't feel, that it's just a job. But it isn't. You see their faces, in crowds, in puddles, in bread loaves that split the wrong way. They don't fade, they multiply. And the town, it remembers. When it's convenient, you're a pariah until a riot breaks out. Then suddenly, they're at your door asking for restraint, which is code for a warning hanging. You oblige, not because you want to, but because it's the only language they understand. They thank you afterward, politely, quietly. Then they stop inviting you to feast days again. Sometimes fruit appears on your doorstep. Not fresh, not in baskets, just one piece. Bruised, usually an apple. It's a message. We saw you. We don't forget. Or worse, we forgive you in our own way. You feed it to the crows. Historians still debate how medieval executioners managed their spiritual lives. Some retreated into mysticism. Others became quasi-herbalists or folk healers trying to tip the scales back toward good. A few went mad. You read once that in Spain, one executioner spent his last years growing herbs and offering blessings to bees. You envy him, not because of the bees, but because he found a way to stop. You haven't found yours yet, so instead, you mend what you can. You whisper apologies. You light candles. You stroke the cat's fur and hope it counts for something. And when it all becomes too much, you kneel by the hearth, close your eyes, and pretend someone is listening. Someone who sees past the rope and the axe and the stained apron. Someone who knows you're just trying to survive a job no one else will do. Sometimes, the hangman needs a side hustle. Your primary work isn't steady. Executions don't happen daily, thankfully, and the town pays when it feels like it. So you adapt. You find odd ways to stretch your usefulness and your coin pouch. You start with relics. It begins innocently enough. A ring slipped from a finger, a scrap of cloth from a nobleman's robe. Someone asks to buy it. You hesitate. They offer more. You sell. Soon you're collecting teeth. Not many, just from those whose families didn't claim the bodies. You clean them, wrap them in linen, and sell them as talismanic tokens to traveling merchants who swear they bring luck. You never confirm or deny. You just take the silver. Fat is more profitable than you'd expect. You render it down slowly in a blackened pot over your hearth. The smell is unbearable. Even the cat avoids the house for days. But the result, usable tallow. You craft candles, simple soaps, even a strange kind of balm. The local apothecary calls bone salve. You never ask what he uses it for. He never asks where it comes from. The bones are trickier. You don't sell those often, too risky. But you once supplied a full skeleton to a physician from the university. He paid handsomely and left without shaking your hand. Months later, you received a letter anonymous thanking you for furthering science. You burned it. Some of your side work drifts into the mystical. One widow pays you monthly for ash from your fire, claims it keeps her free of demons. You provide it gladly. Another man asks for the nails used in executions. You don't ask why. He always pays in exact coin, never speaks. You've even provided hair. Not yours, not alive. It's used in potions, apparently, or wigs. You try not to think too hard about it. You're not proud of it. But it keeps your boots mended and your roof patched. And you're not the only one. Executioners across the provinces trade stories, some of them true, most outrageous. One swears he made love potions from gallows dust. Another claims he sold a condemned man's left shoe to a bishop with insomnia. You nod and smile. Who are you to judge historians still debate whether executioners were seen as mystical figures or just convenient scapegoats? The truth is likely both. In the daylight, you're a monster. In the shadows, a miracle worker. People hate you, but they keep coming back. And yes, sometimes you refuse. A man once offered you gold for a drop of blood from your apron. You said no, not because it was wrong, but because something in his eyes frightened you. The kind of man who already has enough darkness without borrowing yours. You try to keep it all separate. You have a ledger for your jobs and another smaller one for your extras. You write in code. B for bones, F for fat, T for teeth. The pages are few, but worn-handled more often than you'd like to admit. Still, there are lines you won't cross. You won't sell to children. You won't dig up old graves. You won't take from the living. Your rules are simple, harsh, and absolute. You need them because if you let go of them, even once, what are you? Not just an executioner, a ghoul. So you draw the line. You keep the shadows in your shed, sealed in jars and waxed cloth. And when the sun rises, you step into your usual roll hood, on rope in hand, hands clean enough for now. No one asks where your candles come from. No one really wants to know. And that suits you fine. The work slows down with age. There are fewer sentences now, fewer crowds. The gallows creak less often. It's not peace. It's just time moving forward, forgetting you. Your hands tremble in the morning. You blame the cold, though it's been warm for weeks. Your knees ache when you climb the scaffold steps. You climb them anyway. The town hasn't named a successor. You suspect they hope the job will vanish when you do. That somehow justice will become clean, quiet, abstract. But there's always another thief, another riot, another punishment to deliver. You still keep your tools sharp out of habit more than necessity. The axe no longer fits your grip quite right. Your shoulder clicks when you lift it. You've begun to miss once in practice. You don't tell anyone. You had a scare last winter, collapsed in the garden breath, caught like a fish on a line. Woke up hours later with the cat perched on your chest, staring. You took it as a sign of what you're not sure. Sometimes you think about leaving, just walking away. Let the next man or woman deal with it. Find a monastery, maybe, or a fishing village where no one asks your name. But where would you go? You're known everywhere, or feared, which is worse, so you stay. The letters arrive less often, the parchment thinner. One execution every few months now. Branding even rarer. You've started lighting candles for people you don't know, just to hear the flame whisper. The neighbors talk about you like a ghost. Still alive, they whisper. I thought he died in the snow. You see your name carved in the tavern wall next to a crude drawing of the gallows. Someone added a halo. You don't know whether to laugh or weep. You've become folklore. The town's children play hangman in the square, using sticks and stones. You watch from a distance. One boy mimics your walk with eerie accuracy. You say nothing. He'll forget you soon enough. Your house, like your body, is falling apart. The shutters hang crooked. The roof groans with every breeze. You make small repairs more as a gesture than a solution. The cat now sleeps more than she moves. You've started writing your own name in the ledger. Not as a joke. As a placeholder. You like the symmetry. Executioner, executed. Beginning, end. Sometimes you reread the journal entries from long ago. The handwriting steadier, the thoughts simpler. Rope frayed, replaced it. Condemned, sang a song before drop. Mercy purring again. They feel like another man's notes. You tried drawing again last week. Your fingers wouldn't hold the charcoal. You laughed. It turned into a cough that wouldn't stop for 5 minutes. You sat on the floor gasping until it passed. Then you sharpened the charcoal and tried again. You sleep more now, but not better. The dreams are different, softer. Less blood, more fog. You walk through empty streets where no one looks at you. You knock on doors that never open. You swing the axe and nothing falls. Historians still argue about what happened to executioners after they retired. Some became healers, some disappeared. A few, it's said, were buried in unmarked plots beyond the church wall. Their names never spoken again. You wonder what they dreamt about in their final days. Maybe it was this silence candlelight, the slow ticking of a job that no longer needs doing, but still lingers like a stain that never sets. You watch the scaffold from your window now, rather than standing on it, and wait, not for a knock, not for a letter, just for the last name in the book to finally match your own. They bury you outside the church walls. No one says your name at the service. In fact, there isn't really a service. Just 2 grave diggers muttering about the cold, a priest standing several paces away, and a hole dug into a patch of unblessed ground where the weeds have long since conquered the grass. Your coffin is simple, pine roughly nailed. No inscription, just a hood folded over your chest and your hands crossed in a way that suggests someone tried. The cat follows the cart to the burial. She stays at the edge of the clearing, tail twitching. When the shovel hits earth, she vanishes into the bramble without a sound. No one from the town comes. Not the mayor, not the bailiff, not the priest, who used to look away when you passed. But someone places a stone on the grave. Flat, smooth, unmarked. You never find out who. Your tools are left where you last put them. The axe leaning against the hearth. The ropes coiled in the shed. The iron brands still warm from the fire the night before. No one touches them. At first, the town pretends to carry on. Then a letter arrives from a distant village. Another execution requested. No one responds. The mayor delays. A substitute is sought. A man from 3 towns over tries it once, then quits. Says the scaffold creaked in a way that made his teeth hurt. Children keep playing hangman, but the game grows gentler. Less gallows, more pretend trials, and sentences of exile to the next tree stump. The drawings on the tavern wall fade under dust and soot. Your house becomes a curiosity. For a time, they consider turning it into a storehouse. Then they hear noises. Footsteps mostly. Scratching. Whispers. The project is abandoned. The field behind the house grows wild. Your grave disappears under nettles and thistle. The stone remains, but no one remembers why it's there. And yet you persist, not in name, not in story, but in the shape of the gallows, the way the platform leans the hollow echo of footsteps crossing weathered boards. You persist in habits, in the double-checking of rope lengths, in the sharpness tests passed from guard to guard, in the small superstition that says you should always place your left foot first when climbing the scaffold. You persist in silence, in the absence. And perhaps that's enough. Wind down 300-word word. So now we breathe. The scaffold is empty, the hood is folded, the fire has gone out. All that remains is the hush of a forgotten home at the edge of a town that never truly forgave and never truly knew. Outside, the wind rattles dry leaves along the garden wall, where onions once grew crooked in soil, too dark and too rich. A single crow perches on the gallows, beam feathers fluffed against the cold, its eyes black and bright as polished coal. It watches, then lifts into the air, wings slicing through the dusk like scissors through wool. The tools rust slowly. The ledger's ink fades. Your name softens at the edges, eventually swallowed by the pages that follow. Blank ones, perhaps. Or new names written by hands that don't tremble yet. Inside the little cottage, the chair by the fire still rocks, gently moved by memory or draft. The cat sleeps in its usual place, curled into a perfect spiral, as though nothing has changed. As we drift, now imagine the quiet that follows. The kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, doesn't demand redemption. Just stillness. You were the final hand of judgment. The blade in the background. The necessity no one dared name out loud. But now there is no need. You shuffle in just after dawn, boots heavy with travel and nostrils full of wood smoke and pigs. The scaffold looms ahead, crooked and unmistakable. Something's going to happen here. and you, by sheer misfortune or curiosity, are about to witness it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time too. I love seeing where and when you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive as the village is beginning to stir. Sleepy chickens scratch the dirt, and someone's already hawking cider from a barrel by the church. But all eyes are drawn to the wooden platform being erected at the edge of the square, a rough thing of splintered beams and old nails. A small group of boys kicks a leather ball near it, but their laughter's oddly forced. They know what this is. You blend into the scene like a stray dog unnoticed. You pass a cooper hammering at a hoop, a woman shaking out linens, a gravedigger already at work. The town has a rhythm, a strange one today. Everyone's pretending this is normal. And in a way it is. The scaffold has seen plenty of use. Execution wasn't daily fare in most medieval towns, but it wasn't exactly rare either. There's no formal announcement, just the slow rising sense that something or someone is counting down their final hours. You learn quickly that it's not just a performance. There's process, a sort of grim choreography. The villagers don't talk about it openly, but they expect certain things, certain steps, even certain smells. The pine tar on the platform beams the burnt rosemary. Some claim wards off spirits. Historians still argue whether these rituals were religious superstitious or merely tradition born of long exposure to fear. A local boy offers to guide you for a coin. He's missing 2 teeth, but speaks with pride. He shows you the gallows pole, now unused, and whispers, "Tomorrow it's a beheading," with the sword. You pretend to be impressed. Then he points discreetly to a small cottage behind the stables. It's older than it looks, built low, like it's trying not to be noticed. "That's where he lives," the boy says. "The Red Hood." He means the executioner. You can feel your stomach turn slightly. Not from fear, but from the realization that this isn't just some tale. This isn't a knight, or a rogue, or a villain. It's a man who lives in a house, with neighbors, with a dog, with routines. You walk past the scaffold again. A few planks creak as the builders hammer them down. A priest watches from the church steps, expression unreadable. No one will meet your eyes except a woman selling sugared plums. She grins, then glances toward the cottage. It's nearly noon. The sun creeps behind clouds like it's embarrassed to be out. You find yourself at the edge of the square, gazing at the executioner's cottage door. It's shut, but smoke rises from the chimney. He's home. You realize you're not here to see someone die. Not really. You're here to understand why it happens the way it does. Why the blade must be sharpened at dusk. Why rosemary burns beneath the scaffold. Why everyone calls it a ritual, even when it's just killing. And you're just getting started. You step toward the cottage with hesitant feet, the kind you use when sneaking toward a sleeping bear. From the outside, it's nothing much. A squat little structure with a mossy roof, wattle walls, and a slumped porch, like it's tired of holding itself up. But there's something about the air here. It smells like iron and cloves and something older. You can almost taste it. Inside the cottage is warm. Cramped, yes, but meticulously arranged. The hearth smolders with slow-burning peat. Dried herbs, not for cooking, hang in bunches from the rafters, rue mugwort, maybe some dried lavender. A long wooden shelf holds iron tools wrapped in cloth, a few bone-handled knives, and a box with a lock. You're not sure what's in it, but you're not about to ask. And there he is, the executioner. No red hood, just a man in a loose linen shirt with soot on his sleeves. He's younger than you expected, maybe mid-30s. His hair is oiled back, his beard trimmed like he's expecting visitors. He sees you, and for a brief moment, there's tension, then a shrug, and he motions you inside. "Don't touch anything," he mutters. "You weren't planning to." The space feels like a cross between a chapel and a butcher's prep room. Everything has a purpose, and none of it seems casual. The walls are carved crudely with protective symbols, crosses, spirals, and little eye-like glyphs. Some are inverted. Some are burnt in. Historians still argue whether these markings were local superstition, personal beliefs, or just something done out of habit. On the table sits a small bowl of crushed garlic and milk. For luck, he says. Or for digestion. He doesn't elaborate. You watch him prepare a bundle of what looks like rosemary and dried thyme, binding it with red twine. "Burn this under the scaffold tomorrow," he explains almost offhand. Keeps the soul from getting stuck. There's a small mirror on the back wall, an oddity cracked in 2 places. He glances into it now, and then muttering something under his breath. A prayer, maybe, or a curse to ward off curses. Executioners, you learn quickly, live in a web of contradictions, respected by law, feared by all useful, but avoided. No one wants to sit beside him at Mass. No one borrows sugar. He opens a chest beneath the bed and reveals something startlingly delicate, a square of black silk neatly folded, which he says he lays over his tools the night before a beheading. Not for the blade, for the soul. Executioners in medieval Europe often had ritualistic habits, not always by rule but by custom. In some regions, they inherited the job, a bloody family heirloom. In others, they were criminals offered pardon in exchange for service. This man doesn't say which he is. You don't ask. His voice drops when he speaks of the prisoner. "Poor Sod's been fasting, standard for the confession. But I heard he's shaking. Screamed all last night. They gave him spiced wine. Might help, might not." The executioner boils a pot of mint leaves while oiling a pair of leather gloves. They're worn but cared for. He stretches them like a priest preparing vestments. You sense the calm before a ritual. Not performance, not cruelty. Just something that has to be done, and done properly. Outside, a bell rings slowly. Not a church bell. A hand bell. From a boy sent to signal the changing of guards at the jail. Time ticks forward here like water dripping into a cracked pail. Steady, expected a little sad. You glance around again. The cottage is quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the scrape of whetstone on steel. The air has thickened with the scent of mint and iron and sweat. He doesn't ask your name. He doesn't tell you his. But before you leave, he offers a piece of hard bread and a word of advice. If you can't sleep the night before a death, he says, don't watch. You'll carry the image longer than the man carries his head. You nod, then step outside, back into the world that's pretending nothing is happening. The blade waits in silence. It rests on a cloth-wrapped board like an offering. You watch as the executioner approaches it with the same reverence one might offer a holy relic or a venomous snake. No sudden moves, no jokes, just a slow breath and a practiced ritual. He begins by unwrapping the cloth, undyed linen, surprisingly clean, and revealing the blade beneath. It's not the monstrous thing you imagined, not oversized or cartoonishly jagged. Just a wide, slightly curved sword, its edge clean and unassuming. If anything, it looks too elegant for its purpose. The executioner picks it up with both hands, holds it flat in front of him, and stares into the edge. No chips, he murmurs, and you realize he's not talking to you. He's talking to the blade. He places it on a wooden block and begins to sharpen it with a whetstone soaked in oil. Slow, circular motions. Over and over. The sound is steady, whispery. Shh, shh, like someone slicing a whisper in half. Sharpening a blade used for execution wasn't just maintenance. It was performance psychology and insurance rolled into one. A clean cut was considered merciful, and multiple strikes were a public disgrace. Some towns even fined their executioners for needing a second swing. Historians still debate how often that happened, but even one bad cut could stain a man's reputation forever. As the edge hones thinner, the mood in the cottage tightens. He pauses only to dip the stone back into the oil, thick dark, with a hint of clove scent mixed in. Softens the edge just enough, he explains. Don't want it brittle. Steel can betray you. His hands are practiced. This isn't his first sharpening, and likely not his 50th. You notice his left thumb bears a flat, shiny scar, long-heeled, but unmistakably from the blade he now handles. No gloves during sharpening, just skin and steel and a tense sort of affection. He begins the second part of the ritual, checking the balance. He lifts the sword horizontally, across two fingers, adjusting until it rests evenly. Then he swings it, lightly, just once, through empty air. The sound it makes is impossibly soft. A low, short hiss, like wind skimming over cold water. There's a small bowl of salt by the fire. He dips his fingers into it and presses them to the flat of the blade, then wipes it clean with a fresh cloth. For purification, he says. Or maybe just habit. You get the sense he no longer knows which. Some say you're not supposed to see your reflection in it, he adds, eyeing the steel. Means the spirit's still clinging. I don't put much stock in that, but I still don't look. He stores the blade in a carved wooden sheath, a tight fit, polished from use. On the sheath is a small symbol, a pair of crossed bones beneath a crescent moon. Not exactly the coat of arms you'd choose for a family crest, but fitting all the same. As he places the sword back on the table, he covers it with a cloth again. This time, he adds a sprig of dried lavender on top. The scent softens the air immediately. And then, just like that, it's done. The sharpening, the anointing, the salting, the silence. You realize it's been over an hour and no one's spoken above a whisper. The executioner steps outside to smoke a pipe. You remain just briefly in the cottage, alone with the blade. You don't touch it. You don't even get close. But something about it draws your eyes. Not fear, not reverence, just the strange weight of knowing that something so silent could end a story in a single breath. You hear him call from the doorway, "Best get some air." Smell of steel stays with you if you're not careful. And so you step out, leaving the blade behind, ready, waiting. Night falls heavy over the village like a woolen blanket soaked in rain. The square is empty now, save for a couple of chickens roosting beneath the scaffold and a dog with a limp sniffing for scraps. The festive energy of earlier has drained away, replaced by a quiet, slow unease. The kind of quiet that makes windows shudder and candles burn longer than usual. Inside the executioner's cottage, the air is thick with smoke and wine. The hearth burns low. He's poured himself a cup of something deep and red, and another sits untouched beside it, possibly for you, possibly not. He's pacing, not frantically, just enough to wear a small path in the floorboards. His boots are off, his shirt untucked. His belt hangs from a nail near the door, like a snake left to dry. There's no sharpening now, no cleaning, no preparing. Everything's done. Now comes the worst part, waiting. He mutters to himself sometimes. You catch fragments, names maybe, a date, a complaint about a botched scaffold from 2 towns over. You ask nothing. He offers nothing. Executioners weren't known for sleeping well, and the night before a beheading was often the hardest, not because of nerves in the modern sense, but because of the expectations, the weight, the scrutiny. A single hesitation tomorrow, and people talk for years. He sits finally near the fire, sipping slowly. Then he pulls out a pouch from beneath the floorboard and begins sprinkling something onto the flames. Frankincense, no too sweet, maybe juniper. Whatever it is, the scent sharpens the room like a whetstone on your nose. He pulls out a strip of parchment inscribed with runes, or maybe Latin, or both. He doesn't read it aloud, just stares, then folds it and places it under a bowl on the mantel. Outside, a wind has picked up. The scaffold creaks slightly, even though no one's on it. He tells you a story, out of nowhere, about a fellow headsman in the city who had to execute a noble one of royal blood. They made him rehearse with a dummy for 2 days. Had to wear red silk. Had to recite a line. In the service of the crown, I act. Apparently, he flubbed it. They hanged him instead, the executioner mutters. Not for the mistake, for the embarrassment. You look at him, unsure if that's a warning, a joke, or just something he's never told anyone. Maybe all three. He stands suddenly and begins lighting 3 tallow candles, placing each at a window facing the square. For the dead, he says, and so they don't lose their way. Historians still argue whether such rituals were standardized regional or simply the creations of men trying to find a rhythm to the chaos. Either way, the executioner believes in them, or at least acts like he does. He prepares his bed, but doesn't lie down, just stares at it as though daring sleep to come. It doesn't. He sits instead, head resting against the wall, staring at the ceiling. You sit too. You don't speak. There's a moment when the only sound is the fire's pop and the distant bark of a dog. Then he says it so quietly, you almost miss it. Sometimes I dream the blade doesn't fall. You ask what happens then. He doesn't answer. He just pours himself another cup of wine and waits for morning. The morning is cold gray and smells like wet bread and horses. You're roused not by any bell or trumpet, but by the subtle shift of sound outside, the clatter of buckets, the stomp of boots, the low murmur of villagers pretending this is any other day. But you know, and so do they, this is the day someone dies. You walk toward the jailhouse, a stone block that leans a little too far left. Inside, the mood is thick, humid, and still. The prisoner is being prepared. It's a strange sight, surprisingly gentle, almost sacred. They start with a bath. Not a luxurious soak, of course, just lukewarm water poured from a cracked copper kettle into a wooden tub. 2 guards stand nearby, silent as statues. A third man, maybe a monk or a lay brother, uses a cloth to wash the prisoner's arms, chest, and neck with slow, deliberate movements. The condemned sits still, eyes half shut. You can't tell if he's praying or simply numb. Washing before execution served many purposes: public decency, religious purification, symbolic rebirth before death. Historians still debate whether it was meant more for the soul or the spectacle. Either way, it happens. Next, the hair. A small stool is brought out. The prisoner is shaved scalp, chin, neck. The razor is dull, the soap rough. He winces more at this than at anything else. A servant carefully wipes away the lather with a linen cloth, revealing pale skin beneath. Not for vanity, but to ensure the blade has a clear path. No snags, no distractions. The final touch is the clothing. A fresh linen shirt, plain but spotless, tied at the wrists with red thread. Red, they say, to honor martyrdom, or perhaps just to mask the blood. No shoes, no belt, nothing that could be used for escape or resistance. You notice something odd. The guards avoid touching the prisoner directly. They use cloths, sticks, even gloves. One of them mutters a quick prayer every time he gets too close, as though proximity might curse him. There's a small token placed around the prisoner's neck, a wooden cross. Not his, but the executioner's temporarily loaned. A strange gesture, perhaps pity, perhaps routine. The prisoner doesn't speak much. He asks for wine, which they give. He asks for his wife, which they deny. He asks for silence, and they oblige. You're led out of the room briefly while something is said, maybe a blessing, maybe a confession. When you return, the prisoner looks different. Not cleaner, not calmer, just distant, like someone who's already halfway gone. You follow as he's escorted down a corridor lined with damp straw. His bare feet slap against the cold stone, soft and arrhythmic. At the far end is a small door, and beyond it, the day waits. Before they leave, a guard presses a pinch of salt into the prisoner's palm. For courage, for taste in the afterlife, or to remind him he's still of the earth. As they lead him away, you see the water in the tub pink, now with a faint film of soap. The cloths are bundled and tossed into a sack. The razor is scrubbed. No one talks about what happens to those items afterward. You linger for a moment longer, unsure if you've just witnessed an act of kindness or a cruel parody of dignity. Either way, it's done. The prisoner is clean, shaved, clothed, and ready. You follow quietly as the small procession moves into the chapel, a squat stone room lit by a handful of greasy candles and the weak morning light slanting through stained glass. It's cold inside, but not the kind of cold that makes you shiver. It's the kind that stills you, demands silence, and makes every breath feel borrowed. The prisoner kneels at the front on a threadbare cushion placed over worn flagstones. A priest, elderly and soft-spoken, enters through a side door, dressed not in finery, but in a plain wool robe. His face betrays no judgment, only routine. This is not his first confession before the blade. You stay near the back, behind a crumbling pillar, half hidden in shadow. You're not supposed to be here, but no one says anything. The ritual begins with prayer, Latin low and mumbled, interspersed with the prisoner's rasping voice. It's not a dramatic exchange. There's no weeping, no clutching at vestments, no desperate proclamations of innocence. The condemned speaks plainly, tiredly, perhaps even gratefully. Confession before execution was standard in most of Christendom, a final cleansing of the soul, a spiritual preparation for judgment. But its tone varied wildly. Some begged for forgiveness, some raged, some simply went through the motions. This one he confesses stealing, striking a constable, leaving a child to starve. He doesn't deny it, he doesn't explain, he just states it. The priest listens, nods, and anoints his forehead with oil. A drop falls onto his freshly shaved scalp and trickles down. The most intimate part comes next, private words, whispered between the two men, inaudible even to you. Not Latin, not doctrine, just two human beings, one on the threshold, the other holding the door open. Historians still argue whether this moment offered real absolution or merely soothed the crowd's conscience. After all, a cleansed soul made for a tidier execution. But here now, it feels personal, sacred even. After the absolution, the priest removes a small token from around his own neck, a bone charm shaped like a hand. He presses it to the prisoner's palm and says, "Remember mercy." Then he stands. It's done. But there's still a ritual to finish. A small bowl of wine is passed. The prisoner sips it slowly, his hands shaking slightly. He winces. It's too sweet, or too strong, or both. He is then led to a side chamber where he's given a chance to write, though he cannot write. So instead, he dictates a message to a friar, something about debt, a name you don't recognize, a final instruction. Tell them not to come. The friar nods, folds the parchment, seals it with wax, hands it to a waiting boy outside. And that's it. There's no music, no sermon, just the gentle extinguishing of candles, the subtle closing of a book, and the final sound of the chapel door swinging shut behind him. As you exit, you glance back at the altar, half expecting something to have changed. But it hasn't. The candles still flicker. The oil still pools. The stone still bears the mark where thousands of knees have knelt before. The prisoner walks slightly straighter now, not because he's unafraid, but because the weight of confession is lighter than the silence that came before. By midday, the scaffold has transformed. What was once a skeletal platform of beams and nails is now a stage ominous yes, but meticulously arranged. You watch from a distance as villagers hammer the final boards into place. The smell of pine tar hangs thick in the air, clinging to your tongue like sap. This is not just construction, it's ceremony. The structure is simple, a raised platform about waist high with wooden stairs at the rear and a short railing around the edge. No railings in front, nothing to obstruct the view. Spectacle, after all, is part of the design. The axe may be for justice, but the show is for the people. A carpenter kneels to inspect a creaking plank and mutters something about bad wood from last season. A blacksmith arrives, not to forge, but to deliver the heavy iron bucket that will hold well you know what it will hold. He doesn't make eye contact with anyone. You join the workers for a time, helping carry a bucket of nails, passing tools pretending you belong. No one asks your name. No one wants to. The platform bears marks from earlier executions. Rust-colored stains, sanded down, but not erased gouges where blades bit too deeply. And a carved phrase, barely legible, near one corner. Memento mori. Remember, you will die. One of the builders, missing 2 fingers and chewing something foul, leans over and says, "Always use old boards. New ones creak too loud, bad for the silence." You nod, unsure whether that's superstition or practical advice, maybe both. The steps are scrubbed, the corner posts wrapped with red cloth and old custom. Red to signify blood courage penance, or maybe just to distract from what's coming. They place a small brazier beneath the platform and light it with embers from the baker's oven. Into it goes a bundle of rosemary dried juniper and a twist of linen soaked in wine. The smoke curls upward in a gray ribbon, perfuming the square with a scent that's almost pleasant until you remember why it's there. Burning herbs before an execution was believed to ward off restless spirits, to cleanse the place of bad humors, or to calm the crowd. Historians still argue whether this was a civic ritual, a psychological buffer, or simply habit formed over centuries. But it happens here, and everyone pretends not to notice it. The executioner arrives near the end of the preparations, walking with slow, measured steps. He inspects the platform without a word, taps each post, checks the stairs, kneels at the blade's resting block, and closes his eyes. He opens a pouch and removes a pinch of salt, which he sprinkles in a circle around the block. Then he places one leather glove on the railing, just one, a signal perhaps to himself or to someone else. You don't ask. He leaves again without a word. The workers finish their tasks in silence. Tools are gathered, buckets stacked. The scaffold stands alone now, bathed in afternoon light, casting a shadow long and sharp across the square. Villagers begin to arrive not in droves, but in pairs and small groups. Some bring baskets, others stools. One woman hawks boiled eggs near the edge of the crowd. Children sneak glances at the platform, daring each other to touch the steps before being pulled back by watchful parents. You hear whispers. He stole from the bishop's house. It was worse than that. He killed a mule with his bare hands. None of it confirmed, none of it likely. But the stories swell like bread left to rise too long, and always the scaffold waits, clean creaking slightly and smoking faintly with rosemary and wine. The square begins to fill, but not all at once. It's more of a slow trickle, like bees returning to a hive. You watch as villagers arrive in 2s and 3s, their boots slick with mud their faces drawn with the tight-lipped curiosity that marks any public death. Some bring stools, others stand on baskets. Everyone's jockeying for the best view while pretending they aren't. The vendors arrive next. One sets up a cart selling oatcakes. Another offers hot wine ladled from a dented copper pot. A few kids chase a chicken through the crowd, and a woman curses at them in hushed tones. The atmosphere is strange, like a fair without music, a market without wares. No one's laughing. Not really. You find a spot near the base of the scaffold tucked in beside a barrel that smells faintly of pickled fish. From here you can see everything. The crowd's shifting weight, the priest pacing near the church steps, and the executioner himself distant, still not yet in place. A group of older women mutter prayers near the back. Some clutch rosaries, others just knit. One is actually embroidering a handkerchief with the date. You're not sure if it's for mourning or collecting. Crowds like this were common in medieval Europe. Executions were civic events, required attendance in some cases. Parents brought children. Vendors sold trinkets. A man might meet his future wife within a stone's throw of the blood-stained block. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were acts of social control or reluctant rituals of shared morality. The truth is probably both. A local minstrel tunes a stringed instrument but doesn't play. He just holds it as though unsure whether this is the right time for melody or silence. You overhear one man ask another, "Was it theft or treason?" The second shrugs. Who cares? It's not like we'll get a refund either way. They chuckle, but it doesn't last. Children press toward the front, only to be pulled back. A constable warns a group not to block the path. An older man sells talismans from a sack, carved teeth, small dolls, twisted cords of red thread. Protection, he claims, from what he doesn't say. The energy builds slow and subtle, not festive, not quite dread, just a thickening like storm clouds gathering in the lungs. People aren't speaking in full voices anymore. They've shifted to murmurs, as if instinctively aware that the air itself has become hallowed. Then the bell tolls once. Not the church bell, but a handbell held by a boy standing near the scaffold. His arms tremble, but he holds steady. One clear ring, the signal. The guards begin to emerge from the jailhouse, flanking the prisoner. You catch your breath. But the crowd shifts forward, not to help, not to interfere, just to see better. Someone whispers, "He's younger than I thought." Another replies, "They always are." The prisoner walks with a stiffness that has nothing to do with chains. His head is high, though, and his eyes scan the crowd, not with fear, with a kind of worn-out recognition, as if he's searching for someone who might understand, who might even care. You notice a woman near the front hide her face behind a kerchief. She doesn't cry, just watches. The executioner has not yet stepped forward, but the platform is ready. The crowd is assembled. The air is still. And the moment, that hushed, waiting moment, is stretched so tight you're certain it could snap. The prisoner walks as if gravity has changed. Not heavier, not slower, just different. Each step lands with deliberate intent, bare soles on wet wood. You watch from behind the crowd as the procession moves forward, cutting a clean path through a sea of murmurs and stolen glances. Leading the way are two friars, their brown habits soaked at the hem. One hums a low chant, no words, just the steady drone of ritual. Behind them, two guards flank the condemned. Their eyes are fixed straight ahead, hands on hilts, but not drawn. They don't expect trouble. No one ever causes trouble on execution day, at least not in this town. The prisoner's wrists are loosely bound in front enough for ceremony, but not escape. A red cord ties them together, the color almost too bright against the bleached linen of his tunic. His shaved scalp glistens under the clouded sun. He blinks often, but doesn't look away. The drummers arrive next, just two boys with hand drums beating slow and steady. Thump, thump, thump. Not martial, not celebratory, just inevitable, like a heartbeat too close to your ears. The entire square seems to sway in rhythm with the sound. You feel it in your chest, in your knees, in your teeth. It fills the silence without silencing anything. This is the sound that means now. The prisoner passes you, and you catch his scent: lavender and wine, maybe some clove from the oil used in last night's blessing. It's oddly pleasant. He does not smell like fear. They reach the scaffold. The friars climb first, followed by the guards. The executioner emerges last from the opposite side, carrying the blade in both hands, sheathed and upright like a scepter. He walks without hurry, without theater. Just steps into place, nods once to the priest, and takes his position. The prisoner ascends. Each step creaks under his weight. The crowd leans forward as one organism, a shared breath held. At the top, the priest offers a final whisper, a gesture, a small cloth pressed to the man's lips. He does not speak. Or if he does, it's swallowed by the wind. The executioner steps forward, unsheaths the sword, and rests the tip gently on the block. The prisoner kneels. There's no restraint, no shouts, just a long, long pause. You realize now that this walk, the slow march through the crowd, the ascent, the kneeling, was never for him. It was for them, for you, for everyone watching. To give time to witness, to feel, to absorb, so that when the moment comes, there is no shock, just the terrible quiet of understanding. Historians still argue whether the walk to execution was meant to humble the condemned or to elevate the ritual itself. But in this moment, you see the truth. It's not about cruelty or dignity. It's about framing the silence. The crowd does not cheer. No one jeers. A baby cries briefly, and its mother rocks it gently. The drums stop. And then the sword is raised. There is no announcement, no trumpets, no grand declarations, not even a formal charge. The moment before a beheading is not loud. It is breathless. The prisoner kneels, head bowed, not in prayer, but in position. His hands rest on the platform, fingers spread. The priest has stepped back, head low, lips still moving in whispered Latin. The guards glance at one another, but remain stone-faced. The crowd, utterly still. And then the executioner speaks. Just one sentence. Say your piece. The condemned lifts his head slightly, not enough to see the crowd, just enough to speak clearly. His voice is hoarse, but steady. I was not a good man, he begins, but I ask that no man curse my name, who has not hungered as I have hungered. A few in the crowd shift uncomfortably. One woman exhales sharply, perhaps recognizing his voice. Perhaps not. He continues, "Tell my sister, I remember the rose she wore in spring." And that's it. No proclamations, no defiance, just a handful of words, strange and human and difficult to categorize. Historians still argue over last words, whether they were scripted, spontaneous, or apocryphal later inventions. Many were never recorded at all, but those that were often held more weight than all the town laws combined. The executioner nods once. His face betrays nothing. He has heard hundreds of final statements. Some screamed, some wept, some said nothing. This one he will likely remember. He steps forward. There is a brief moment, barely perceptible, where time seems to halt. The prisoner lowers his head again, settling into place, and rests his forehead gently against the block. A friar begins a low hum. The executioner raises the sword. There is no flourish, no dramatic arc. Just one clean, silent movement, practiced and exact. And then it's done. The blade meets flesh, bone, sinew, and passes through. The body slumps forward. The head falls into the padded basket with a dull thump. Not a dramatic spray. Just a soft, horrifyingly domestic sound, like dropping fruit into a sack. The crowd does not scream. Some gasp. One child begins to sob quickly, muffled by a hand. The executioner steps back, wipes the blade on a cloth, and places it down with reverence. He removes his gloves one finger at a time and places them beside the block. The priest steps forward, murmurs a prayer, and sprinkles a few drops of holy water over the remains. The brazier beneath the platform hisses faintly as the blood begins to drip. No one moves just yet. It takes time. Death, even when expected, always demands a moment of silence. Then gradually the crowd begins to shift. Some head to the wine cart, others drift toward home. No one speaks loudly. No one looks directly at the body as it's covered with linen. You remain for a while, watching the shadow of the executioner shrink as he walks down the steps. He doesn't look at the crowd. He doesn't speak, and no one thanks him. The executioner pauses at the foot of the scaffold, one glove still on the other, dangling loosely in his hand. He reaches into a leather pouch at his waist and removes a small folded scrap of linen. He uses it to dab at his forehead once gently, then tucks it back away. The gesture is deliberate, ritualistic, and oddly tender, as though he's wiping away something more than sweat. He then pulls the remaining glove off, finger by finger, and lays both on the platform beside the sword. The gloves are never worn again after a beheading. That much is understood. Next comes the cloth. He unwraps the blade carefully, using the same linen it had rested on the night before. He doesn't clean it, not here, not now. Just wraps it as if covering a sleeping child and secures it with red cord. You're struck by the quiet around him. The crowd has thinned, but not disappeared. People linger, pretending to admire the church door or examine a fruit stand when really they're watching him. Not with curiosity, with distance, with that specific kind of social coldness reserved for someone necessary but unclean. The guards gather the body. They're careful, but not ceremonial. The head is placed beside the torso, both wrapped in coarse canvas. Two boys are tasked with scrubbing the platform. They mutter and squint occasionally, glancing up at the executioner like he might curse them if they mop incorrectly. He ignores them. Instead, he opens a small wooden box by the base of the scaffold. Inside, a sprig of dried rosemary, a pinch of salt, a clove-studded orange. He adds the cloth used to wipe his brow and closes the lid. Later, he'll burn it, not to destroy evidence, to cleanse the memory. Executioners across medieval Europe had rituals like this, tiny gestures to restore a sense of humanity, or at least distance themselves from the death they just dealt. Historians still debate whether these were psychological defenses, communal expectations, or quietly religious acts. Likely all three. He speaks briefly with the priest. Nothing public, just a few soft words and a hand pressed over his own heart. The priest nods. There's no blessing, no absolution, just acknowledgement. Then he steps off the scaffold, and no one follows. Even the guards keep a small distance, not out of fear, but out of custom. The man with blood on his hands, even by law, is not someone you walk beside. He passes the vendor carts, and every seller looks away. The woman selling sugared almonds suddenly finds her apron string very interesting. The egg hawker starts stacking eggs that were already stacked. It's like a spell, one you didn't notice until now. You watch him walk alone, back toward his cottage boots, leaving faint prints in the damp dust. His gloves stay behind. The blade, wrapped and sealed, is carried carefully under his arm like a sleeping baby. And the silence, so carefully built all morning, follows him down the road like a cloak. The walk back to the cottage feels longer, even though your steps follow the same ruts and stones you crossed earlier that morning. The sky is paler, now tinged with the kind of light that doesn't quite commit to either sun or gloom. It smells faintly of blood and rosemary, which is somehow worse than smelling of just one or the other. You trail behind the executioner at a respectful distance, not because he asks for it, but because something in your bones insists on it. He reaches his home without pause. The door creaks open, then swings closed behind him with the thud of finality. You hesitate for a beat before pushing it open again. He doesn't object. Inside, the fire has gone low. The tools remain laid out, but they seem smaller now, just objects again. No longer sacred, no longer deadly, just metal wood cloth. He sets the sword on the table and unwraps it slowly. The blade is still faintly stained. He doesn't clean it right away. He simply stares. Then, with a sigh, he removes his boots, peels off his overshirt, and pours himself a drink. It's wine, probably the same bottle from last night. He doesn't raise a toast. He doesn't mutter anything poetic. He just drinks. You sit. He doesn't speak for a while. Neither do you. Finally, he says it was clean. You nod. What else can you say? He lights a few candles one by one, setting them in the same spots as last night. The mirror on the wall catches the light and throws it crookedly across the ceiling. You remember what he said about reflections and spirits and notice now that he avoids looking into it. There's no feast, no reward, just bread, a bit of cheese, and another drink. He lays the gloves, already stiffening with dried sweat, into a small iron pot. A handful of herbs, a twist of parchment. He lights them. The scent is sharp, acrid, earthy. Burning post-execution items was common in some regions. It wasn't law. It wasn't doctrine. It was just done. Like closing your eyes after a nightmare, even though you're awake. Historians still argue whether it was meant to purify or to forget. He takes out a small notebook. Unusual. Most executioners weren't literate, but this one writes, carefully, one name, one date, one note, no second strike. He adds a dot of wax to the edge of the page, then closes it. You ask him quietly if it ever gets easier. He doesn't look at you, just says no, but it gets quieter. A bird chirps outside, just one, then silence again. You notice that he keeps 3 cups on a shelf, 2 clean, 1 stained. You wonder if he's ever had company. He lies down on his cot, fully dressed, arms crossed over his chest, not asleep, just still. And you sit there for a long time. The fire now just embers the sword back in its sheath, the air thick with burned herbs and unspoken things. Dawn slips into the village again, though it hardly feels like a new day. The same mist hangs over the rooftops, and the same crows caw from the church steeple. But the square has changed. The scaffold stands empty now, though not untouched. Your first task is not assigned, it's understood. Cleanup. The executioner rises early. His movements slow, but practiced. No hangover. No dramatics. Just the same quiet ritualism you've come to expect. He straps on his boots and walks back to the square without speaking. You follow. The body is already gone. Carted off in the early hours to the grave pit beyond the chapel grounds. Not consecrated ground, of course. Condemned souls had their own corner, marked only by wooden stakes and whatever flowers anonymous hands dared to leave, if any. You arrive at the scaffold to find the platform already drying. Blood has soaked into the wood in a dark, uneven patch. One of the boys from yesterday, the same who cleaned the blade, stands nearby with a bucket of sand and a stiff bristled brush. He doesn't speak to you, just nods and begins scrubbing. You take the bucket of water and pour it slowly across the steps. The blood thins, runs, disappears into the cracks. There is something horrifyingly domestic about it all, like cleaning up after a family meal. The executioner collects the canvas cloths used to wrap the body. He doesn't wash them, just folds them tightly, places them in a sack, and tosses the sack onto a cart bound for the tannery. Leather workers pay little mind to where their fabric comes from. He removes the braziers, douses the ashes, and scatters the charred rosemary into the wind. There's no ceremony, just an arm's motion and the faint scent of yesterday lingering in the air. You find the head basket behind the scaffold, empty now, but still damp. You carry it back to the cottage, where it will be scrubbed and reused. Not for heads, at least, not always. Sometimes it's just a basket. The guards return briefly to take down the railing. The planks are pried loose, stacked, and set aside. They'll be reused for firewood or mending sheds. The execution block is the only thing that remains in place. It's too stained to be useful elsewhere, too symbolic to be repurposed. Villagers pass by pretending not to look. Some offer curt nods. One man tips his cap. A woman places a sprig of thyme near the edge of the scaffold. No one says why. And then cleanup is over. No official marks are left. No plaque, no inscription. But the square feels different. It always does for a few days. Children avoid it. Chickens scratch at other corners. Even the wind seems to whisper around it rather than through it. Back at the cottage, the executioner places the tools back in their chest. The blade is cleaned with oil and cloth, then sheathed and wrapped once more. The gloves are gone ashes now. The notebook is closed. The wine bottle is empty. You ask him if anyone ever thanks him. He smiles briefly. No, but no one forgets. You'd think that after such a grim display, there'd be some communal acknowledgement. Maybe a candle lit a sermon, preached a song sung in the tavern. But instead, the village resets. Within hours, the square is swept clean. The market returns. Baskets of apples replace bloodstains. A new barrel of cider is tapped. The world moves on not because it forgets, but because it must. And yet the executioner does not. You trail behind him as he returns to his life of half-exile. Back to his cottage by the well, where no one knocks unless something's broken or dying. The door creaks open the same way it always does. Inside, the hearth has gone cold again. He doesn't speak much today. He brews a pot of something herbal mugwort, you think mixed with wild mint and a touch of vinegar, for nerves, for sleep. He doesn't offer you any. Maybe because he knows it won't help. His boots are muddied. His hands are clean. Scrubbed raw, actually red. Around the knuckles, the nails clean, but brittle. The price of touching death with care. You ask him what he'll do now. He shrugs. Sharpen tools. Wait. Patch the roof. You stay quiet. There's something fragile about the room now, like a violin string pulled just shy of snapping. He feeds the fire, a twist of dry kindling, but doesn't sit close to it. Outside, life resumes. You hear children laugh again. The same ones who cried yesterday. A dog barks near the mill. Someone starts hammering nails into a new fence. But inside it's still and heavy. Executioners often lived apart not just physically, but socially. They couldn't marry into most families. Their children were marked. In some towns, they had to wear distinctive clothing or enter church only after everyone else had left. Historians still argue whether they were feared or pitied more. Likely both. Your host, if he can be called that, sits with his back to the window, polishing the edge of a spade. Not the blade, not today. Just a spade. For digging. For helping the grave digger if needed. You ask him why he keeps doing it. He answers without looking up, because if I don't, someone worse might. And you realize it's not pride. It's not duty. It's fear of what happens if no one cares enough to do it carefully. He stands and pours a measure of wine, cheap sour red, hands you the cup without speaking. For a moment, you drink together, the only sound the soft clink of ceramic on wood. Then he speaks again, almost as an afterthought. They'll talk about it for a few days. The children will act it out with sticks. The priest will mention sin, but give it a week, maybe two. He doesn't finish the thought, just smiles faintly. Outside, the wind shifts, and the scent of rosemary returns. Not from herbs, just from memory. You return to the square one last time before dusk. It looks ordinary now. The scaffold is gone. The ground has been swept and trampled flat again. A boy tosses stones into a puddle where the blood had pooled. A dog lies curled beneath a merchant's cart. The world unbothered continues, but the memory lingers soaked into the planks that were carried off, settled in the dust beneath your boots, nestled in the folds of every whispered retelling. You stop near the church steps and listen. Two women are talking. One says he barely flinched. The other replies, "They say he confessed everything, even the stolen saddle." Their voices carry not judgment, but a kind of sleepy admiration, like recounting a well-done performance. Or a fire that spared the bakery. Further down, near the well, a group of teenagers reenacts the moment. One pretends to kneel. Another swings a stick in an exaggerated arc. The others laugh nervously. They scatter when a real adult approaches. You wander through town and hear it again and again. Hushed conversations. Wildly inaccurate retellings. One man insists the prisoner tried to escape. Another swears he heard a demon fly from the body when the blade fell. Someone else claims the executioner didn't blink. The stories are already drifting away from the facts. Execution rituals in medieval Europe weren't just acts of punishment. They were theater myth-making and communal ritual rolled into one. Historians still argue how much of it was meant to enforce morality, how much to distract, and how much simply existed to make people feel something in a world where survival left little room for sentiment. You pass the herb seller. Her rosemary bundle now comes with a rhyme, keeps off ghosts and sharpens luck. She winks when you look confused. Back at the cottage, the executioner has gone quiet again. He's carving something into the handle of a tool. Not a blade, just a wooden ladle. He doesn't look up as you enter. You ask if it ever bothers him the way people talk afterward. He replies, "That's the point. They don't talk about me. They talk about it." You nod. You understand. Even the role of the executioner fades, receding into the margins of the tale, while the act itself becomes legend. A story retold at firesides, embroidered by rumor, exaggerated for drama, softened for children. The man behind the blade, he disappears into the background by design. The last thing you notice, before sleep pulls you under, is the wooden box near the hearth. It's closed now. The cloth, the herbs, the gloves, all gone. Only the sword remains wrapped in quiet, waiting. The fire crackles low, casting long, slow shadows across the timber walls. Outside, the village has gone quiet, just the soft rustle of wind brushing through the grass and the faint creak of a weathered sign swaying on its hook. Inside, the air is warm and still. The executioner, worn from ritual and repetition, sits unmoving, eyes half shut, as though sleep might finally come if he doesn't reach for it. You watch as his breathing deepens, each exhale slower than the last, like waves drawing further from the shore. Whatever weight he carries, and he does carry it, is eased just slightly by the softness of routine, by the silence that now lives in the corners of the room. You lie back and close your eyes, letting the final images drift like smoke. The red thread around the wrists, the low chant of the friars, the creaking of the scaffold as it disappears into planks once more. It's over. And yet, in some way, it lingers, etched into the cobblestones, whispered in alleyways, stitched into the sleepy fabric of this muddy little town. But for now, there are no more crowds. No more steps to follow, no more blades. Just a fading candle, a slow breath, and sleep